welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. Clarity comes through committed movement. One of his advocacy, no other than Mr. Weston Brandon.
Thanks for having me on
Welcome.
here, man.
Yes, welcome on Book 101, Mr. Weston. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Yeah. So, like you said, my name's Weston Brandon. My my calling in life right now is as a speaker, an example of how to get through grief and hard stuff. And I am now a published author, and I've begun writing music that I incorporate into my keynote addresses. So, speaker, songwriter, author, and then of course, husband, father, and widower. Um, that's my signature story, my unique thing that a lot of this built off of was when I was 23 years old. My wife became pregnant with my oldest son, and she gave birth to him soonly at about 26 weeks, and she passed away shortly thereafter from a pulmonary embolism. And I quickly became a single father, single widowed father. Had to figure out how to rebuild life and become successful again. And I eventually got remarried, had a couple more kids, and changed careers completely. And now I'm kind of doing it again with the speaking and author stuff. And yeah, that's the cliff notes of where I'm coming from. That's me.
Mr. Weston Brandon, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And today let's talk about from tragedy to triumph, how to rebuild your life after loss. What does the phrase from tragedy to triumph means to you personally? Is it triumph about healing, purpose, or something else?
I guess you could say it's kind of all inclusive there. Whatever your personal triumph is overcoming a large obstacle that usually has to do with what you feel is a giant responsibility that you're struggling with, right? So, from my perspective as a widower, my biggest responsibility was obviously to my infant son, right? I had to figure out a way to take care of him because my career at the time I had been very successful in software sales and had made plenty of money. But then when I lost my wife and all of that kind of blew up, I suddenly found myself unable to even call people on the phone and have a normal conversation, let alone a sales related conversation. So it was super stressful. So being able to find a way to provide for me and my son, my family, financially was priority number one for me. And then also to do whatever inner work within myself I needed to do to be open to another relationship was kind of another version of what I wanted to triumph in myself. Because when I lost my wife, thinking about being with anybody else was kind of a disgusting thought at the time. I felt like pursuing another relationship was almost cheating, even though my wife was no longer here. So I knew that I had to do work in my own mind and in my own heart to make it so that I could actually be open to that again. Because I knew that if my son was going to have the best possible environment, that involved both a mother and a father, not just a single dad who was broken trying to figure it out. So I made those two kind of my initial goals initially when I was in the pit of that grief, was to do that work in myself, to open myself up to another relationship, and then to figure out what I was going to do job wise, if I could figure out the job I currently had or if I had to change careers. And well, long story short, I changed careers and I did end up getting remarried, had a couple more kids, and was able to rebuild and finally get back to a place income wise where I felt like I was stable. I wasn't making as much money as I did in sales, because you can make a lot of money in sales if you're good at it. But I switched over to doing trades, and I was fixing refrigeration equipment, kitchen equipment, things like that. And was just doing something where I didn't have to talk to anybody, and I that's what fit me more at the time when I was, in that emotional state. I didn't want to have to talk to anybody to make money anymore. So that's why I switched to trades and work with my hands. And that I was able to turn that to be successful as well. So I kind of figured out a system on how to force success into your life, however you want it to look, and I wrote a book about it.
Can you share a moment when you realized that rebuilding was possible, even if it felt unimaginable at first?
Well, I knew it was possible even the very day that I lost my wife, because I had a very strong spiritual background. I had a very what I thought at the time was a really good relationship with God. I was a religious person. I had uh, given 2 years of my life to go be a missionary in another part of the country, and so I had spent a lot of time building relationship with God and studying Scripture, and I truly believed everything that I had learned, had read, and had taught. So when it was happening, that was the perspective that I had, and I knew that this life wasn't the end. There was more to this. That didn't necessarily help me feel better about it. I was very angry towards God about it, and when I would pray, it was very angry. But even through that, I had experiences where I felt like He was talking to me, even through my anger and my sadness, on just giving me a little bit more energy to keep going. I would open up to a scripture that would talk to me, that I felt like God was talking to me and giving me something that I needed, a perspective shift for that day. So I don't think I ever lost the hope of the possibility of rebuilding. I just knew it was going to take a lot of work and it was going to suck, and I just wasn't happy to have to do it at that time.
How did your definition of strength change throughout your journey after loss?
Well, before I lost her, I was very confident in my career and also just my, I don't know, who I was, both mentally and physically. Um, but my strength was built a lot off of the material things that I had obtained through, like things like my career, like how much money I made, um, things I was able to afford, the house that I had, the vehicles that we had, the things that we had. I put a lot of my self worth into those things, and I think that's where I drew a lot of my sense of strength, was through my accomplishments. And then the day that I lost my wife, it was all kind of ripped out from under me. It was like I had the rug torn out from under me, and none of that mattered anymore. And I realized strength was more in my own self identity and my own relationship with God. So I focused in that area, the areas that I could, that I felt like were more important to build, to strengthen, and to develop resilience in, so that I could eventually reaccomplish, I guess you could say, secular success, so that I could provide for my family the way that I wanted to. So strength to me now, it's not, I don't look at somebody and their success in the world and the things that they have anymore to judge how successful I think they are. Because going through this journey, I've met so many people that have nothing, that are better human beings than I was. And I've met people that have everything that I thought you could have: the house, the car, the job, the family, all of the things, the money, and are also just as good and amazing people. So I know that you can be a superb quality human being and not have all those things, but also you can and have all those things. And the same goes on the other side of that spectrum. You can be a terrible person and have nothing, and be a terrible person and have obtained a lot. So I I decided that, well, I didn't decide, but I realized that these people had something different that I hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about. And that was not only a belief in themselves and a solid foundation for who they knew they were, with their relationship with themselves and with God, but also in how they saw the world. I guess that's kind of a long answer to your question, but how they treated other people, where they saw their place on this planet.
Truly, truly empowering answer, Mr. Weston. Very well said. So tell us the overhaul, your
The
upcoming book.
overhaul, yeah, the book is actually I need to update my website. It was just released, so it is available to purchase on Amazon now. I think there's a link in there that people can hit to go check out the book. Um, but the overhaul was, well, a few months ago. It was in January that I decided that I needed to do this. So I've progressed really fast, really quickly with the book and with the speaking. But it was a few months ago that I kind of felt this pull and this draw to start sharing my story publicly and get it out there. And a lot of what I wrote in the book stems from my experience of both the sales career that I had before my wife passed away, and then the new career that I've spent the past 5 years developing since then in the trades. I've had the opportunity to train, develop, and coach other men in both of those fields. And I discovered there were a lot of similarities on what held people back on being able to excel at their careers in both fields that seem like they're on totally opposite ends of the spectrum. The biggest thing was that if these guys didn't have a very clear understanding of who they were as a person and they were very comfortable with that, it made it a lot harder for them to retain new information. When I was training either the sales guys, or if I was training the blue collar guys trying to learn electrical and refrigeration stuff, they had a hard time learning those things if they still had a lot of mental battles going on within themselves. So, what initially would start as, I guess you could call secular training or workplace training, soon as I got to know them, developed more into, I guess, life coaching, because I realized that there was some work that needed to be done there if they were going to progress as fast as they were hoping to. And a lot of my experiences in doing that, I pull into the overhaul on how I helped those guys change their perspective about themselves, how I helped them to discover themselves. And the the key phrase in there, right there, you can see on the screen that clarity isn't found, it's forged through committed movement. And when I was trying to help these guys understand that they can get what they want, but they cannot be sitting on their hands waiting for God to tell them what to do, or waiting for somebody else to tell them what to do, and just like waiting until they know what they should do before they go do it, which might sound kind of counterintuitive, but I compared it to how a magnet's formed. Now this might be a quick little science lesson, but a magnetic field's not generated unless a charged particle, an atom, electron, or anything, unless a charged particle is in motion. When it's moving, that's when a magnetic field is generated. And then we have solid magnets we put in our fridge, and that's just a whole bunch of those aligned atoms that are moving kind of in similar directions that create that magnetic field. And I would use those analogies because I studied that a lot in school to teach these guys, like, you have to be moving towards your goal if you want to be able to attract to yourselves the things that you need to build that reality that you're trying to create. But not only that, you have to make sure that you're heading in the right direction, right? That's the next question. Like, well, okay, if I move towards something, how do I know that I'm moving in the right direction? Well, Simon Sinek is a famous motivational speaker, and he's well known for his TED talk that he did years ago about start with your why, or find your why and start from there. Don't go backwards and do everything until you find out why you're doing it. And when I lost my wife and I was holding my infant son in my hands, well, he was my why, right? He was why I felt like I needed to go figure it out. He was why I needed to make money. He was why I needed to figure my mental health out. He was my why, but holding him in my hands didn't give me any clarity about where to go or how to do it. It just gave me a lot of motivation that I had to figure it out. So what I realized was that when we're searching for that why, really what we're doing is we're trying to find the answer to the question that why presents to us. And I use why as an acronym, WHY, for a question of what hails you. And I help these guys understand that if you do enough mental work inside yourself, you go and dive into your past, you work on your traumas, you figure out what wounds you have, and what masks you wear to hide those wounds, and you start to resolve some of those things, then you start to move some of the weeds away from your eyes, and you can start to get a sense for the answer to that question, what hails you. And it's kind of like a trumpet sounding way off in the distance to some higher calling, or to what your heart wants you to do. And then if you have a general idea of where that's coming from, then you can start moving towards that. And that's how you can figure out which direction you're supposed to go. If you feel fulfilled in the progress towards that goal instead of constantly confused the entire time. Then if you sprint that way as fast as you can, then things start coming. And I have, the whole book dives into a whole, not just a step-by-step process, but a framework and a system to follow to guarantee that once you figure that out, the things are going to come to you to make it work, because I've done it over and over and over. I followed the same system to get the very house that I'm sitting in right now. We wrote down exactly what we wanted, and we followed the framework in the book, and we got exactly the house that we want. necessarily like what it looked like and where it was, but exactly what we needed in the house. It checked all the boxes. Same thing with my career, and I'm doing the same thing building my speaking business. I'm getting the right people at the right time to speak to the right audiences, and I know that it works. So the book is just like what you see right there. It's fixing your mindset and driving success, but from my perspective of having to do that, rebuilding from losing everything mentally and emotionally. Where I came from, I felt like I was in a crater and had to completely figure out life again, and how I did that. And I just wrote the story as if I was coaching one of these guys that I was training. And that was kind of my avatar for writing the book. I was speaking to this guy the whole time I'm writing the book, and this is what you have to understand. This is how you do it. And that's the overhaul. It's my story of how I climbed out of that and how you can do it yourself.
Mr. Weston, the term overhaul implies a complete and systemic rebuild. Why did you choose this word? And what does its full mindset overhaul entail?
Yeah, the overhaul was a very intentional word to choose, because if you're overhauling an engine or a motor, you are not replacing it. You're overhauling it. And what you do in an overhaul is you strip it all the way back down to its bare parts, and you inspect everything inside of it. If you're working on an engine, for example, you're gonna inspect the inside of the cylinders and the pistons, and you're gonna repair or replace the individual components that need it, and you're gonna build it all back together again to be as good as you can possibly get it, as close to new as possible, instead of just buying a new engine, right? And that's what I feel like we have to do with ourselves when we're in a situation like I was, where you lose everything and you have to figure it out. Or if you're in a position where you feel like my life is not the way that I want it and I feel like I need to change everything, I need to do something else. Well, if you need an overhaul in life, this is where you start, and it starts in the mental game, right? The framework that I teach is an acronym called DRIVE, and it's 5 layers. And I teach those 5 layers as if they're layers of a magnetic field. And that magnetic field resonates off of you to attract to you the things that you need. And the first letter, D, that is discover. Discovering your wounds, discovering your traumas, discovering your strengths and weaknesses, although those are kind of contextually dependent, but more so discovering the masks that you wear to hide that pain and figuring out why you think the way that you do. And then R is resolve, and that's taking everything that you discovered about yourself and resolving it, and then developing a strong resolve to continue pushing as hard and as quickly as you can. Once you've done that enough, then that what hails you thing comes in that I mentioned. You start to get a sense for where your heart, where your soul's kind of pulling you towards. And once you start getting that feeling, if you've done enough to discover and resolve in yourself, you discover that feeling, and it's time to invest in that direction in yourself as all in as you possibly can. For example, when I lost my wife, I knew that I had to do the work inside of myself to be open to another relationship, right? So I went to therapy, I went to all the things, and tried to humble myself as much as possible and figure out not only the trauma from losing my wife, but all the things as a child that I experienced that shaped the way that I think. And in doing a lot of that, I started to understand myself a lot more. And then I felt like I was in a position to go back out in the dating world. And I did that. And I met my second wife in the widow and widower community. We call it your chapter 2. That'll be a term, if any widows hear this, that they should be pretty familiar with. Some people hate it, some people don't, but it's a thing. And that was what was hailing me, right? That was where I felt pulled, was to go, where's the one that I'm supposed to be with, to be the mother of my child on this earth, right? Because I just lost the one that I thought was supposed to be it. And then once I found that, something else was hailing me, and that was new career. I had to change. I knew that I could not do my sales job anymore because of something, going on in my head. I couldn't handle that stress anymore. So what was hailing me was security. I needed to create security for my family, and I figured out a way that sat good with my heart and with my mind, and felt right. And that was going back to trade school and getting into the trades. So I invested as deeply as I possibly could. I took out student loans and I went back to school, and I quit my sales job, and just dove all the way in. You know what I mean? So that I is invest. And whatever that looks like for you, that's going to be different for every person, but you have to invest in yourself and do it so far and so deep that it's impossible to come back. Because if you give yourself escape routes, a lot of times you'll take those escape routes when stuff gets hard. So you have to burn the bridges and make it impossible to get out of, so that you can actually sustain the momentum that you need to. And then the V of that is visualize. And that's the most powerful catalyst to making sure that your investment pays off. The visualize is more like looking further ahead into the future to the point that you've actually reached the goal, or that you have actually constructed this new reality that you want to build. You have the new job, you have the promotion, you have the new house, you have whatever it is that you're investing towards, right? You look at who you are once you've made it, and you see, how am I different? How is that version of me different than the version of me now? Do I believe the same things? Do I think the same things? Do I think the same way? Do I have the same habits? um, all those things, and you get really, really clear on what that version of you does, what that version of you thinks, and what that version of you believes. And then you try to make as much of that who you are right now, so that you can actually become the person that you need to be to sustain that reality, so that that reality can actually come into form. And then it's also exhibiting gratitude and authenticity for having reached the goal, but doing it more like in the present tense. An example I'll give you for that, because that sounds a little bit confusing without any context, is this. I'll give you an example of a current visualization that I've currently got for my career, and it's really long. I've written it out in a lot of detail, but the Cliff Notes version is along these lines: that I am a traveling motivational speaker, and I currently speak to a lot of students, both in colleges, high schools, and then some corporations with young leadership. And people see value in my message, and they pay me for it, and I'm able to change a lot of people's lives. And because of that, I bring in enough money that I am able to provide for my family. I'm able to stop renting out the basement that I have, so that my family has more space, and my kids have space to play. And then I write down, in detail, what things look like, what they feel like, what I feel like. And through that whole visualization, I'm exhibiting and I'm expressing gratitude for having made it. I'm expressing gratitude for the people that had to come into play to make that reality a thing. I'm expressing gratitude to God for giving me the tools and the understanding to create it. And I'm giving gratitude to myself and my family for helping me along that way, and giving myself space to build that reality. And you it's some people do it in vision boards, right? Some people call it manifesting, but that's what the V in visualize is. And you live in the goal as if you've already made it. And you try to do that as authentically and graciously and with gratitude as you can. And then the E of drive is just elevate. And that's kind of two different coins here. Sorry, we lost my screen. I gotta wake up my camera. The E, being elevate, is trying to make sure that that investment and the goal that you're working towards elevates as many other individual people as possible. So you're kind of partnering with God to create it. You're blessing his children. And so in that visualization, I make sure that my elevate process blesses my family, the people that I speak to, extended members of my family, and my community. And I write down exactly in detail how they're being blessed because of my success, even though I haven't technically made it at that level of what I'm visualizing yet. But if I live in that reality, and I make sure that I am behaving as if that's actually real, things happen so much faster. So that's a really quick, breakdown of the drive framework, but that is how you make it happen, right? That is the overhaul, the mental shift of how you can change the way that you think, change the way that you see the world, and change the way that you see yourself, so that you can build whatever new reality it is that you want to build. And you can, for lack of a better term, this sounds a little crazy, but you kind of make the world bend to your will, in a sense, right? Like you become who you need to become to achieve what you want, and everything else has to fall into form. So hopefully that answers a little bit of your question.
What is the most common broken mindset you see holding otherwise talented people back from success?
It is absolutely the masks that they wear to hide their inner pain. And that inner pain could come from a bunch of different sources, right? That could be childhood traumas. It could be marital issues. It could, anything that is causing them pain in their life, that they don't want to address. They don't want to think about. They just want to bury it. Then they are forced, if they want to bury it and not deal with it and not work through it, then they have to put on a mask so that they don't see it in the mirror when they look at themselves. And those masks hide them from other people and from their goals. Because I believe, to really reach your goals the way that you want to reach them, and to be able to sustain them long term, you have to be as authentic as possible. So that lack of authenticity, because of the masks that people wear to hide their pain, I think is the biggest from my perspective of the people that I've worked with, that has been by far the biggest thing that holds people back from getting what they want is they cannot be authentic because they are not authentic with themselves.
Very well said, Mr. Weston. Totally, totally empowering.
Thank you.
How is how is fixing your mindset different from just thinking positive?
Well, thinking positive, you can sit here on your couch and meditate and pray and visualize all you want, but if you don't get off your butt and go do something, and nothing's ever going to happen. You can't attract to yourself the things that you need to meet your goals if you're not a charged particle in motion, like I talked about earlier, in motion towards that goal. So, I mean, the positive mindset is certainly necessary to maintain the momentum, but a positive mindset alone does not create momentum. Only actual movement, actual heavy action does that.
What is your personal overhaul moment that inspired you to write this book?
I'm not sure I could give you a individual moment, but more of a, well, I suppose there is one moment that kind of started the dominoes falling. About it was a little over a year ago, probably 18 months ago or so. I was a youth minister, youth leader at a local church that I go to, working with 16 to 18-year-olds, and we just got done with a church youth activity. And coming home, and I was feeling a little bit more in a kind of a spiritual mindset. And on my way home, I got this feeling out of nowhere that there was more I was supposed to be doing with my life. Like God needed me to do something more, something bigger that had to do with my story of healing and progress after losing my wife. But I had no idea what it was. And I didn't do anything about it for a few months, and that feeling just kept eating at me and eating at me and eating at me, and it kept getting worse and worse. And I was getting so frustrated with myself for not figuring it out that I finally knelt down and prayed, and I says, "Hey, whatever it is that I'm supposed to be doing, obviously I can't motivate myself enough to figure it out. So I need you to force me to get into action." And that was I thought about that prayer for a little while because I knew if I asked him that I was gonna get it probably. And what happened a few days later, I started reading those books that I talked to you about, the Jackrabbit Factor series. My mother had given those to me, and I had been reading them, and that was the first time for years, well, not years, first time in months that I finally felt like I was actually making progress towards whatever that feeling was. That feeling like what hails you, right? And I felt that pull so strong. And when I was reading those books, I finally felt like I was making progress towards that pull. I was doing something in that direction, but I still had no idea where it was going. And after I finished reading all three books, and it opened my mind a lot to how the world works, and I had these big ideas of how to create more financial stability for my family and spiritual stability and all these things. And as I'm kind of in this higher state of mind, I guess this higher vibration or whatever you want to call it, I was filling up at a gas station, and suddenly I had this thought hit me super hard that I needed to go see my mom. And I didn't know why. So I was like, oh, I hope she's okay. So I book it up to my mom's house, which was only 15 or 20 minutes away at the time. And I got there and she's fine. But then she tells me this experience that she has that she felt like she was meant to do something better and bigger on a bigger scale for women and girls who have mental health issues because she had just watched a funeral service for a young lady in our neighborhood that had taken her own life. And she's like, I need to help these girls and do something more. And as we were talking about that, it suddenly hit me like a ton of bricks that I needed to speak and share my story. I can't really describe how that happened, but that moment was the big catalyst of like I know what I got to do in a general sense, but I have no idea how to go about doing it. So I just called a couple people that I knew did something like that. I grew up in a little tiny town next to a guy named Chad Hymas, who's a National Speakers Association Hall of Fame speaker, and he's made a living for years going around speaking. He's in a wheelchair. He's a quadriplegic, but I knew him relatively well. I had his phone number, so I called him up and I talked to him, and he said, "You just got to get going, jump in with both feet, and here's some people you should talk to, and get going." One of the people I ended up meeting was a lady that helps people take their story, turn it into a book, and then take that book and turn it into coaching and speaking. So I got talking to her and I was like, that seems like a logical route to go. So let's go that route. And Well, now you're looking at the fruits of that. She designed that cover for me, and I wrote everything on the inside of it. So I can't I can't say there was one moment where it was like, oh my gosh, I need to write this book. It was more like I need to share my story in a way that I can help other people overcome things. And through working with that lady that was my coach, we brainstormed a lot and we came up with that title and came up with a structure for the book and made it happen in a couple of months.
Congratulations, Mr. Weston, for your debut book. Hoping for more and more empowering books like this to come. So before
We're working on a workbook companion for it right now. So that
Ye-
should, I hope in a couple of months I'll have a workbook companion to go alongside with it.
Looking forward for that. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please to listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and mental health 101. Love letters in third season, and my movie 101 review and music 101 in fourth season, and science 101 and sex 101 in its first
Nice.
season. Please
That's a lot
listen
of
to them.
podcasts, man. You got a full plate.
Yes, yes, sir. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Western, what is the one thing you hope readers feel empowered to do immediately after finishing the overhaul?
I would hope that they quit ignoring the tugs on their soul, the tugs on their heart that are inviting them to do something different or bigger. And it's probably going to be a little bit scary, whatever that is. But I think most people feel a pull to do something. That might be just as simple of I need to go to therapy and work on my mental health, or I need to change jobs. I need to this, that, and the other. Or, hey, maybe there's somebody listening that's like me, like I need to get my story out there. I need to write a book. I need to speak, whatever that is. I just hope that after they read the overhaul or after they listen to this podcast or any of the other ones that I've been on, that they'll finally take that message, the clarity comes through committed movement, to heart, and realize that they're not going to get any more clarity on how it's going to work out until they actually start doing it, and take whatever the first step is to start doing it, like immediately, just get moving, and then things start to come into form, and they come into focus after that. And if you don't mind, I have a free ebook that they can download that actually helps with that process. If you want to show them a link,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, they
What?
just go to my website, westonbrandon.com. It should just pop up automatically, but if it doesn't, they can go to westonbrandon.com/free gift. And I wrote a little ebook that breaks down the process of how to make that happen, of how to figure out what is it that I'm supposed to do, and how do I actually make it happen, and how do I partner with God to force that success, right? And the name of that ebook is called God's Laws of Success. And it's what I have lived, it's what I've done, and it's how I've created everything that I've been able to create so far. And arguably the reason that my progress is so quick right now is getting into the public speaking arena.
Yes, Mr. Weston Brandon. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So
Thanks, Daniel.
can you please invite our listeners to support your upcoming book, advocacy, or your business itself?
Yeah, my calling in life is to help people to overcome their challenges and to learn how they can do that and how they can partner with God to force their success. And I love speaking to groups to do that. I'm particularly passionate on helping young adults to figure out what it is they're supposed to do and overcome the fear and turn into magnetic momentum. So please go check out that ebook that I wrote on the website, order the book, invite me to come speak to your organization. That would be the best. That's what I love doing. That's my niche. I love doing that.
The best indeed. Yes, people, let's support Mr. Weston Brandon, because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering books like this to come. So, Mr. Weston,
Oh yeah.
thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thanks, Daniel.
More to come, people. See you soon.